I love this scenario right here because this is one of those, what we're going to talk about today is honestly, it's all the stuff that no one ever sees. It's all the stuff that a lot of people, including leadership in a lot of churches, don't even know that happens or think is important. But the reality is the whole sound man, worship leader, sound system, technical stuff is what holds everything together. You know, it's like there is a verse in the Bible, and this is going to be completely out of context, but it's funny, so I'm going to say it. Unless the army hears the sound, the trumpet sound, how will they know to go to battle? So what I say is, unless there's really good sound, and you can hear everything, and it's awesome, and it's impacting you, how will you know to raise your hands in worship? It's out of context, but it's okay, because it's a joke. But these two guys right here, no, you don't need to clap. Okay, go ahead. These two guys right here are two of the most important people to me, even relationally, but in our world here at Bethel and with Bethel Music. They hold everything together. They're always pushing us for excellence. They're the reason why we've got a Midas console in the back, and we've got all automated monitors, and we've got new subs last night, you know what I'm saying? And so that the sound can be really good and impactful, and you can go to the next level. And so what we're going to do is we're just going to open it up, and we're just going to start talking about worship leader, soundman relationships. And I always say this, like when we teach on this, I always say this right out of the gate, like, and it's real important. I honestly believe that probably next to the leader, the soundman is the most important person on the team. I really do, because I've been at places where I hear a band. I'm trying to give a scenario real quick. I have a band that I really like, and they're amazing. And I've basically bowed down to them, you know, as a kid, like, these guys are amazing. Well, I did a conference with them one time, and it was at a hotel, and it was through a Mackie sound system. And they had a volunteer doing sound. I'm not going to say names because that'd be terrible, right? Dishonoring. So I went to the sound check, and I was sitting there in the set, and I'm like, this is the band that I've thought was amazing all these years, but now they sound like normal. They don't sound very good. And it was 100% because of the sound. And so the next night, what happened the next day is we went out and we bought a whole new system to this whole thing. And then the next night, apparently, magically, the Holy Spirit showed up. Magically. And it was amazing. And of course, no one would say this, but I'll say it, and I'll be bold enough to say that it was the sound. It was the sound. And so it's very important that we have those things in place. And these two guys are not just good at what they do, but they are the best. Martin Smith came along, shipped with us on tour, and said that Chris Greeley over here is one of the top 3 soundmen in the worship movement ever. So, and Clint right here has had opportunity after opportunity to be a production manager for some of the largest bands in the secular world and chooses to stay here and help our world. So I just want you to know you're hearing from the best today. So you're welcome. I'm gonna ask you guys some questions. Do you guys want to jump in, or do you want me to just go ahead?
Hi.
I agree. We're the most important.
You should, because it's true. Just don't let it get to your head.
I think it's a huge privilege to be able to work here myself. This is the best environment I've ever been in an audio position for sure, because there is a lot of respect for our position here, and just everybody's so dang nice. I don't know, that's not always the case, and I mean I am just so grateful to be here. I had no idea what I was in for when I decided to move to Redding, California, a place I would never want to live before I moved here. That it would just be this awesome all the time. It's been really great.
All right, thank you, Chris. I'll receive that. Let's talk about this. I think let's talk about the lack of connection with worship leaders and the soundmen. Clint, go for it.
So probably the most common question I get from people is, it's like, my worship leader is like, they're not they don't listen to me. And that's a really common problem. And I think that like the reason that that's the case is because you're not developing a relationship that's more than just surface level. And I think that's really common. It's like, man, you're just such a blessing. But like becoming real friends with your tech guys and building a really strong relationship so that you can trust them and be in a close relationship with them. And I think that solves like so much communication issue. It always does, really. But it just, I don't know, it makes it so much easier to deal with problems, feedback. When you love them and you appreciate them and you're like friends with them, it's like, hey man, it fed back, and you don't feel like offended that something bad happened, you know.
Yeah.
Because you know that they're not attacking you because you have a real relationship. That's really important. Well,
I think it's the best feeling in the world as a worship leader, and I think this is the goal for all of you if you're not in this position, but to know that your sound men, monitors, stage crew, and then the front of house mixers have your back as a worship leader. And there's not a worse feeling, I don't know about you, when you're leading and you know there's not a relationship there, and you know they don't have your best interest in mind, and vice versa. So when you're up there leading, they're not gonna, like they don't really care. They're not taking it serious, and they're just kind of like, whatever you give me, I'm just, you know what I'm saying? So these guys, that we've built a good relationship enough to where like I will ask them when I'm leading or doing sound check, like, are we good? Is there anything we could do to improve? And what they tell me, I respect and I believe it because I know that they've got my back and I've got their back. So I think that's so important. And you would be surprised, and some of you experience this now, but I think the anxiety goes away and you become a better leader when that happens because you can step out and you know that they've got your back. You're a team. Even though there's separation, we are a team,
Yeah,
So that's the goal. But go ahead.
And along those lines, a little bit, like when you have their back, that is, I feel like that's never lying to them, ever. Even if it's not good. If you're like, yeah, this wasn't the best and it could be better. Or this was the best it's ever been. And either way, if you always tell the truth 100% of the time, that just goes so far with your team, just.
I'd say that vice versa too. Like I think that if you're encouraging your sound guy, like, man, that was killer, and then sometimes we're friends, so I'll be like, yeah, that wasn't so great. I've heard you do better. And because we have a relationship, we can tell each other that. And, usually it's this way more than that way about the bad part because it's just boom all the time. But to be able to have that relationship to where you could do that, it's so much important. And if you don't have the relationship, you have people coming to you, which we've experienced where like, oh man, that mix just doesn't sound good. And you're like, I don't know you. Why are you talking to me?
Yeah, that never works. Never
and then
works.
you just turn it up and make them mad.
Yeah.
I don't do that.
Never do that. Ever.
But we meet weekly.
Yeah.
We meet with what we do, and we meet with our main musician leaders that lead all the different musicians and our sound head people. And we meet weekly, and we talk about real stuff, And at times we pray with each other. And since we started doing that, I think everything has really gone up a notch on all levels. And so now Chris can go during a sound check to like a guitar player and say, hey, your tone needs to whatever, and the guitar players do it and they change it. Like it's a dream, right? Normally there's always a fight with the soundman, but it's one of the most valuable relationships for a church is the worship leader and the soundman. And then in a lot of churches, the worship leader is a bridge from leadership to the soundman, because the leadership a lot of times goes, they're only looked at when there's feedback or there's a problem, and the soundman rarely gets the kudos and the pats on the back if it was amazing. Usually if it's amazing, man, the band was amazing today. But let's just get honest, okay, for a second. Worship leaders, your soundman is everything to you. If you did a good job, 50% of that reason is because the soundman's back there working his butt off. There's times where I'm like, man, it was amazing. Gosh, they did amazing today. And it's because Chris Greeley is working his butt off in the back. And so there's got to be honor where honor is due, and the second you start forgetting that, that's a problem. So I think it's important, and then you got to be a cushion from leadership to the soundman too, and you got to really portray to the leadership of your church all that the soundman is doing and the hard work they're doing and everything, because leadership a lot of times, it's out of sight, out of mind. And so I think it's important as a worship leader that you've got your soundman's back and you've got a real good, let's talk about that for a bit, how we have it structured here with Dan, myself, and then the whole thing.
For me, I got here a year. Actually, I interviewed for the position a year ago, like last week. Yeah, it's 4th of July week. And I didn't know anyone here, so I knew Brian. And I got here, and you talked about the bridge. For me, it took 6 months to learn all the pastors, because there's so many. We have a lot of pastors here, and it took a long time to build even a relationship for me with the senior leadership. And so you talked about the bridge, and you were that, like, especially for me when I got here, because I deal with a lot of the other ministries of the church, and so being able to get a direct conversation with Chris Valentin or Eric Johnson or Bill and was very difficult until like probably 3 months ago even, I think, And so, it's been huge for me, to have that, to know that, And in the past, I've had that work really well, because I've been in other churches where the worship leader and I, they'd help me with the different pastors, and then I've had it kind of the opposite way, where it's like, they come up to you and they're really mean to you, and they don't know it. They're just talking, They're not trying to be mean, but they're just talking, and they just say it, and you're like, oh man. But because we built a strong system here, and so Dan Fairley is actually technically my boss. And Brian's technically my boss, and Eric's technically my boss. So we have a lot of different input, but it works really well because we all, again, it goes back to relationship. We all have a really strong relationship together, and each person oversees a different thing. So
yeah, it's interesting how it works here because we have we've got streaming, and we've got like the movement part of the church, and then we've got the local part of the church, and then we've got streaming, which is kind of both departments. And so it's interesting because a lot of it isn't just like one boss over certain people. There's several, and we have to work to interweave in our communication. So you've got like Eric, who's in charge of the local church, but Bethel is not just a local church. The biggest part of Bethel is like the movement piece, and so you've got like that's where I would fit in with the streaming and then the Bethel music piece. So it's really complicated, but if you can build things on a relational level, it just makes things like, it just doesn't work if it's not there, huh?
Yeah, not at all. I mean, I think that I actually had fears of that because I didn't know anyone when I got here. Like, okay, it's great, we get along great.
Yeah.
But man, what else? Because it's like a theme park here. I mean, we have so much going on during the week. In fact, Tuesday is our busiest day of the week, actually here, not Sunday. And I immediately built a relationship with Bethel Media, built a relationship, started with Eric, and of course with Dan Fairley as well. And now I'm, even more branching out. It just kind of feels like, and if I hadn't done that, it would have been a disaster. It would have been,
Yeah, and Clint's like in the middle of everything. He's the production manager, so he takes care of all things having to do with production. But then when you take it to just like, there's a few of us guys that are just mixed guys, and our job is to make sure it sounds good. And if we didn't have this structure, we have a structure basically where we have Brian and we have Dan Fairley and any of the senior leadership pastors. And those are the people that basically get to come and tell us what we can and can't do. And having like the open sound booth policy where any church member can walk into the sound booth and just start screaming at you is probably the most unhealthy thing ever for that position, because all it does is just makes the sound guys really angry, or just like bums them out huge and makes them want to quit, or because most people that are angry about sound are just really actually hate music. I've noticed with a lot of them, they don't listen to any music. They sit in a house and read books with their dog, and
it's true.
I've seen this so many times. But that whole streamline thing has, at least for me, and I think any of the other guys in a mixed position, it's been, obviously they can tell Clint too, but there's a way about how we receive our feedback that is like a cushion to where you never get that super offended, super upset feeling, because this is the boss man. One of the boss mans comes up and says, this is what's going on, whether it's too loud or, every once in a while, it's pretty difficult to tell what's going on up there, and we have people that stand next to the subs here, and they can be like, hey, the bass is a little heavy today, or something like that, and you know that it's good. Or somebody comes to them and talks to them, and it's a really good system. I like it a lot.
I think we did it wrong for years, Sometimes the only way to figure out how to do it right is to do it wrong for a long enough time to realize I'm doing something wrong and it's not working. So everything we're talking now is because we've been doing it, I'm not going to say wrong for 15 years, but I wouldn't say exactly the right way. So a lot of the reason why it works here is because these guys had experience outside the church and on a professional level, working with normal people that maybe aren't, and so they don't get quite as offended because they're used to how things really are. And so when you're picking your people, I think it's important to pick people, number one, that can lead without you in the room, because that can be leaders, and communicate. And if they're not the best communicators, having a system like we have there's cushions and there's filters and stuff. So the ship can run without being a disgruntled, angry sound man who can shipwreck a meeting without anyone really knowing it. Because you want your sound man to be pumped, and be pumped. And I feel like we work hard at keeping things going, like even relationally. And like, I think it's always important as a worship leader just to be encouraging to your sound man all the time. And if it sounds good, text them, like give, just like you would your electric guitar player. We were joking before this, we were talking. Let it be known that every electric guitar player in the world's number one love language is words of affirmation. That's why they play electric guitar. Well, a sound man might have that same love language, but they hardly ever get told anything unless it's bad. So you gotta work extra hard as a band member or worship leader to encourage your sound man, It's important. If you want to keep good people around you, you gotta work extra hard. If you're a leader, and I've learned this the hard way, you got to over-communicate to keep people around you that are strong. It's just not going to work if you don't. So,
I think when you're encouraging too, when you talked about encouraging sound guys, one thing to do is pay attention to the little things that they do that most people don't notice. Like, you talk about, it's like great to be like, oh, it's a great mix, but like they're usually the ones there before anybody else afterwards. And just the little things, like for me, I'll go to, I just did this recently. We were here to build a set for days until 2 a.m. And, the people that don't get credit are sitting back there right now that were here busting their tail,
That's exactly right.
And there you go. See? So take up all our time clapping.
It's good.
It's good. But I mean, nobody notices that. And that's like, that happens, cleaning the stage up when you're not there, getting, all that stuff. What happens when you do that is they'll do it more and they'll serve you more. It's always the case when you're encouraging those little things, so.
I think one thing, especially because a lot of, churches, we grew up in Weaverville, a small town, 250 people in the church, which is huge. It's like a mega church for 3,000 people, in a town. But you're dealing with volunteers. How many have volunteers for the most part in your sound? Yes, see, so most of you have volunteers, and so it's so much more important even then, when money's not attached, to encourage and they're serving, and we can't ever forget that. They're serving, and so what I always like to do is take them to coffee or lunch. Show them your appreciation, but also give them music to listen to. Get on the same page. Do whatever you need to do that you're on the same page together, so that when they say they think it sounds good and you're up here leading and you can't hear it, you can actually trust that it sounds good. So do whatever you need to do. So for a while, when we get a new soundman on or whatever, I would not lead for like a couple Sundays and just sit with them, and we just process together. And so we'll get on the same page. And so, because when there's not that, there'll be some friction, and then you never trust, and then you'll withdraw, and then there's a lack of trust, and then eventually it falls apart. So work extra hard with your soundman on getting on the same page. And another thing too is you need to break the attitudes are unacceptable, absolutely unacceptable in your department, number one, and especially within your soundman, because we're talking about soundmen. And these guys right here, well, the thing I really appreciate about them is they don't have attitudes, they don't have agendas, and you know, because we have time relationally, and we picked them based upon not just their skill level, but their attitudes. You know, and that's really important, you know, because they're representing a movement, they're representing a piece of you to even your leadership. And you don't want your soundman flipping the bird to the leader that comes up, or the old 80-year-old lady that comes up and says, it's too loud. You know what I'm saying? You don't want that, because that's a representation of you. So work extra hard to make sure that piece is intact. Is there anything else that you guys think is important that we talk about relating to all this?
And when you talk about volunteer, I also think it's a good idea to create processes to help them grow. And I don't mean like, hey, you should go to that class to learn how to mix sound, because that doesn't go off real well. But I mean, like, you know, I always wanted to go to conferences to learn stuff, and there's stuff out there, but the church never really, when I was young, it never really valued me, and so I kind of was stuck learning on my own. And you know, that sending them out for that little bit of money or whatever to grow and learn, just it pays off for you in the end, you know. And the other thing I would say about volunteers is, remember, I started off as a volunteer at 16 years old in the youth department. And if it hadn't have been for somebody including me and doing those things that we talk about early on, I mean, I wouldn't be where I'm at now. I wouldn't have a career. I wouldn't have anything. And so it's important to know that volunteers are awesome, and there's more than just building, you know, their ability to run sound or ability to do lights or do lyrics or any of those sorts of things. You could be starting something that could carry on their whole lives, you know.
You wanna? Okay. One thing that I think is important too to establish in your department regarding sound is you always want to get better, and you always want to improve, and we never, ever stop growing. Spiritually and like technically in the excellence. We have a thing around here where we never want to plateau. We never want to stop. And sometimes our gift doesn't allow us to grow anymore, you know, skill. We all have a certain amount of gifting, you know, and whatnot. But even with sound, like it's like our relationship with the Lord, you know. We're satisfied 100% in Jesus and what he did for us on the cross. We're satisfied in that relationship, but we're never satisfied, right? We're continuing to grow and learn. And so with the sound, we're never satisfied. Right? There's always could be better. It always could be better. It always could be better. And we keep a posture. And it really is, honestly, it's that humility. You know, like you travel somewhere and you experience something that like, oh man, we could really learn from that. And instill that with your soundman so that he doesn't plateau or she doesn't plateau and just get bored. You don't want him to get bored. When we start getting bored, man, it's dangerous. I think it's really important that we remember that, you know. And the sky is the limit, you know. There's a lot of departments, worship departments in the church, and it's just like, what do you want? Do you have a vision for more? Do you have a vision for excellence? Do you have a vision for that top level that you could experience?
Yeah, I think along with that goes, especially in your audio department, I mean, having the tools to get there. I mean, I had the opportunity of starting on junk like a Mackie console, like when I was 6 with my parents. You know, my dad owned a production company, and, you know, it's like you work that piece of gear until you have gotten better than that gear and it's time to upgrade. But you need to squeeze every ounce of quality that you can out of that piece of equipment. And prematurely upgrading isn't going to make you better. You need to understand every single piece of that equipment before you upgrade. And sometimes that goes fast. Obviously, some stuff you just can't make it sound good. But most things you can. I remember one time I was in Alaska, and our sound system was a couple of huge stereo speakers and a little 12-channel console. And funny enough, it actually sounded good. I don't know how, but it did. And, you can't blame it on your gear all the time. But at the same time, once there is a point at which you're better than your gear now, and you need to upgrade your gear. I feel like a lot of churches will stop at that point and just start blaming everybody else on the problem when that's not the problem. The problem is it's time to get a better equipment. And so, we did that last night. We were just like,
We got some new subs.
We're like, these subs are not very good. Let's do something about it. But at the same time, it's really, really, really important as a church that you guys have experienced people picking your equipment, and you don't just trust anybody to pick equipment. Otherwise, you're just throwing money away over and over and over again, because there is a right direction to go and a right way to do it. And there are people out there that know what they're doing, and getting in contact with those things for your sound people is going to, that's going to advance it so much, because you won't be throwing your money away. Just don't throw your money away. I feel so strongly about that.
We made that mistake here, right? We actually had to got a new PA in. It wasn't the right PA, and had to buy a new one after that. And unfortunately, it's like, we could have had all that money together and bought a really big PA. That'd have been awesome. But you mentioned about blaming the people. One of our other campus, I'll be real quick, is not too long ago, we were getting a lot of volume complaints and and they were pointing to the guy there, and what it really was is that the drums weren't treated well, the room wasn't treated well. We made some changes, did some different things. No more complaints about the volume, and it wasn't the sound guy. It sounds great in there now. So same guy, kicking tail.
It's interesting, this whole thing, because being able to communicate to leadership, for the most part, like our leadership, our pastors, or whoever's in charge, like a movement of the church, their mind's not, most of the time, they're not in this realm, right? They hire you, or you're a volunteer worship leader, and you're supposed to kind of be that person to handle it all. But being able to communicate to leadership about sound needs and all that kind of stuff can be really difficult. And I just want to encourage you guys, it took me, 14 years, to kind of through trial and error to somehow convey what we're doing now, and it was difficult. I got offended, for years, and because I knew I was right, and I was right. And I was. And then now leadership would say that. But that's hence my message yesterday. Learning how to communicate your needs and what could, because most of the times people, it's when you experience something for the first time that you never experienced, you didn't even know that was even a reality. It's the first time you taste a certain food, and you're like, what have I been missing all my life? It's the same thing with good sound, and so you almost want to show them what you could have, in a humble way, and remember that in a humble way, because griping and complaining, getting mad and bitter is not going to get you anywhere. Gosh, I wish it could. I wish it would, but it just doesn't work. And so figuring out a way to communicate to your leadership, and you're putting yourself in their shoes, the difference between good and bad, and what you could have, and going really low, in that. I think it's really important that we learn to do that as worship leaders, because the reality is they're giving you 50% of the worship set, We'll talk about that later next week when I teach on worship leading. They're giving you 50% of the worship, of the service. And in their mind, that's enough. Like, they've given you the whole world. And you're asking for more? What? You're asking for more? I'm giving you, you know what I mean? So we'll talk about some of that dynamic. And I think it's important to kind of get in their shoes for a little bit and befriend them and encourage them. Pastors need just as much encouragement as anyone else in the church, And so it's important that we're not always asking from the pastors, everything, and it's always negative. And you know what I mean? No one likes that. I mean, it doesn't work in a marriage. It's not going to work in that relationship either. So it's really important that we approach this thing on a different, on a level that both sides can be heard and both parties can be heard. So hire people to do the job, or volunteers to do the job, that don't micromanage, that can handle it, that can do it themselves, and work with them and spend a lot more time with them than you think you probably even need to. All right, so I think we could talk about this for a lot longer, and I'm sure you guys have lots of questions, and we might have some question and answers time later next week about this. And if you guys want to ask more questions about this, these guys, honestly, probably even after the session, I would say honestly, like these two guys right here, as far as sound and all that kind of stuff, there are people that are as good, but really in the world that we live in, there's none that's going to be better, so. And I mean that too.
Thanks.
I'm not just saying it because we have the mic. I tell you guys that.
Sure.
He does.
So.
I have one more.
We were in Nashville. I'm going to say this right now. I'm saying it again. We were in Nashville and everyone was there, and we did a show at this arena thing, and Ed Cash and all the Christian guys were there, and all the, everyone was there, and all the label guys were there. And what was awesome? Every one of them came up to me afterwards and said, "Who mixed?" I said, "Chris Goody." They said, "That is," I'm not kidding you, I'm not exaggerating. They said, "That is the best mix we've ever heard." Yeah. Just saying, man. Come on.
It's because the system wasn't mono.
This is true. Mono's the worst.
Don't get mono sound systems.
I don't even know what to say to that. That's it. Thank
you don't have. There's nothing to say about that, Chris. All right, we're done.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah.